Good morning. Welcome to the February 5th, 2025 informal meeting of the Savannah-Chatham County Board of Public Education. This is an informal meeting. We do not take any votes. This is information only. And we're going to start the way we're starting all of our informal meetings from now on with a little minute from one of our board members. In the future, we may hear from a committee chair, but today we're going to hear from Sean Kachmar. Sean and I had a meet. We're in Atlanta for Savannah-Chatham Day, and we got to meet with the Governor's Office of Student Achievement. Sean?
Yeah, good meeting with some folks up at Governor's Office of Student Achievement, and also a couple of folks who were kind of driving literacy program awareness. Two key takeaways, though. We asked them about the list of schools on the lowest quartile and why it was on the website and then off the website and what the status was there. And I'm going to use very careful language. They are working on their data integrity, and once they are confident in the data, then they will repost the list. Is that a fair summary, Mr. Moss?
That is a very fair summary.
Okay. And they also said the process may have been a little rushed, but they're just triple checking their T's and I's. So stay tuned. The second issue was a bill dropped in the General Assembly, I guess the day we were there that week, which would authorize an expanded cadre of training providers for school boards, would modify training requirements and also expand the pool of potential training providers to make it easier for local boards to get the necessary training. We'll see where that bill goes. We expressed our initial support for broader training resources that would make it easier to get the training we need and kind of more specific topics of interest for us. And that's it.
Thank you, Sean. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you for that report. It's really exciting that there may be some other educational opportunities for us, because I just don't need to take parliamentary procedure anymore. But not to say that I won't, you know. But the idea of learning something new is really exciting. And I'm thinking about some of the things that we could use knowing as we pursue our work, like, you know, understanding qualitative data. Like when data and accountability come to us and say, this is what's happening, you know, Dr. Howard Hall and Mrs. Hall, they're like on it. They're like, they lived this for their career. But for us, for others of us, it takes a little more digging, particularly as trends change. If there's a trend or there's a change in how data is being looked at, it would be great if we could be up to date so we could be the best consumers. So I don't know if they're going to invite us to give feedback into what that training would be, but I think that kind of professional development would allow us to support the superintendent and her team better. And thank you for bringing back the board member informal talks at the beginning of the meeting. I think it's really, really helpful. I don't have anything today except to say that I'm glad it's come back, and also to invite District 2 and folks who want to hear things in the informal content of the meeting to contact their board members and say, hey, I want to hear about this. Thank you.
Ms. Hall?
Mr. Moss, I just want to formally ask you to see if you can get a 6-hour training for us this spring here in Savannah, as you did last year. That would be very helpful.
I will do that. We're working on it. Dr. Brinkman?
Yeah. On Dr. Hodson's brown point of bringing things back, I would like us to consider a former mechanism of friendliness and team building that we had for a while. We had small groups that would get together, just hang out and chat. I don't know if we have to parcel ourselves out like we were and like, these are the only people you get to go, here's your pod. But I think it would be helpful if we intentionally tried to do things outside of discussing everything board related and just having time together in community. I think that helps us understand where everybody's coming from. And we have at least one new board member. And I know we haven't done this mechanism since before COVID. So I don't even know if Ms. Grabowski was, and I know Mr. Smith, Reverend Smith was not on the board either. So, and Roger. So it would probably be helpful, I think, if we intentionally just reached out to each other and said, hey, you want to get coffee? You want to get lunch? Your side of town, my side of town. So think on that, board members. I don't want to ask the board president to force us to do it because then that feels odd.
Keep it under a quorum. All right. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
Let me just say, David just reminded me of something. We did that get-together, and he took me to a fabulous restaurant, and they're gone, and we mourned it. But I do remember now, we did that, and it was very nice.
Love it. Love it.
Okay.
Don't worry, I got some new haunts for us, Connie.
Moving on. We will now have a report on our favorite subject, HB 581.
Good morning, everyone. This is basically a modified presentation, again, based upon some conversations also that I had in Atlanta and from the actually public hearing that the city of Savannah did yesterday. So I attended their meeting to make sure our presentations going forward, we're going to be in sync. We're all saying the same thing. So basically, we will use this presentation for the informal meetings today, modify it, and use it for the public hearings also. What is Georgia House Bill 581? The bill was created in response to concerns from Georgia legislators about increasing property tax values. The floating homestead exemption goal is to control assessments of properties by freezing property values across the state. The Property Tax Reform Bill 581 was signed into law on April 18th, 2024, and was voted on by the voters on November the 5th. The bill provides relief and clarity to taxpayers by offering the following: a statewide floating exemption, an optional sales tax to further offset property taxes, and property tax reform. The bill does not eliminate existing property exemptions that some counties already have. Frequently asked questions. Does it affect a homeowner's existing homestead or similar exemptions? No. Georgia Bill 581 does not override existing homestead exemptions for any jurisdiction. However, it may override existing floating base year and frozen exemptions if the House Bill 581 exemptions provide a greater benefit to the taxpayer. What happens if a home is improved or is destroyed? Substantial changes to the property are considered when assessing the property. Any substantial change will increase or decrease the adjusted base year value of the home. Can we opt in or out at a later date? There is no future opportunity for a local government to opt in or rejoin the House Bill 581 exemption. However, other local governments may still obtain a similar homestead exemption in a traditional manner of having their local legislators create their own exemption. Can the floating exemption be transferred? No, this homestead exemption is not portable or transferable. It is tied both to the property owner and the home. However, in the case of a surviving spouse who is not on the deed at the time of the spouse's death, said surviving spouse may continue the homestead exemption in the same manner as if the deceased spouse, providing that the surviving spouse is otherwise eligible for the homestead exemption. Does Chatham County already have an exemption? Yes. The largest exemption in Chatham County is called Stevens Day Homestead Exemption, named after local politicians Ron Stevens and Burke Day, who sponsored the law into state legislation in 1998. The Stevens Day bill allows homeowners to freeze property taxes based upon their purchase price, but for only their primary residence. It was proposed to prevent homeowners from being taxed out of their homes when the property value went up. The legislation saved many local residents hundreds or even thousands of dollars a year. Their legislation became the framework for other counties and eventually for this very own House Bill 581 legislation. As far as Stevens Day framework, the Stevens Day exemption freezes your home value to the base year value, providing stability. However, it allows gradual increases in home value based upon inflation for the school district and the city of Savannah taxes. It protects you from property tax increases. The exemption protects homeowners from sudden and rapid increases in property taxes, promoting affordability. Stevens Day has been litigated and amended through the last 25 years of its existence and considered the best homestead exemption in the state of Georgia. By comparison, there is only a few differences. House Bill 581 covers properties that are larger than 5 acres. Base values for both of them increase at a rate of inflation. Stevens Day started out using inflation rates and switched to a CPI calculation. House Bill 581 is expected to use a similar CPI calculation, but using information for an urban area. House Bill 581 provides a statewide exemption, whereas Stevens Day is just for Chatham County residents only. House Bill 581 allows local jurisdictions to opt out. However, cities and counties can use a sales tax option approved through a local referendum. As we look at the Consumer Price Index comparison for CPI and CPI-U that's being recommended to be used by the state, there is very little difference from the last 10 years of historical data. On this slide, we show the comparison of annual taxes if we use the last 10 years and duplicate the pattern for the next 10 years. For a current homeowner, the first year under 581 uses tax year 2024 to establish the base year. Here, the House Bill 581 calculation does not benefit the local homeowner. And over a 10-year period, they will end up paying an additional $9,574. But for a future homeowner or someone that purchased a house this year, the first couple of years of the annual taxes are about the same, or would be the same, but could favor Stevens Day calculations moving forward. What to consider? The pros for opting in are not the same in Chatham County as most other counties because we have had the same local legislation for the last 25 years. As our mayor mentioned yesterday in their public hearing, we were the first in the state to have such an exemption. However, the cons for opting in are based upon uncertainties. Opting in will require an enormous amount of time, additional staff, and work for county staff to prepare calculations that could complicate the exemption process. This, combined with the uncertainties of future state amendments designed to benefit taxpayers in other counties, doesn't provide a stable environment. As our city manager recommended, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Our local legislators can amend the Stevens Day Bill 350 when needed, as they have done in the past, to benefit the residents of Chatham County. We believe this is why every municipality in Chatham County is choosing to opt out of House Bill 581. We're scheduled to have our first and second hearing tomorrow and the third on February the 10th. The vote on the resolution is scheduled for February 19th. Well, we have heard from legislators that there is talk at the Capitol to push back the deadline for the resolution to the 1st of May. That ends the presentation. Are there any questions?
Hoskins Brown.
Thank you. I don't have a question because of the extra data that you put in the presentation that put in the comparison of what a taxpayer may experience under each of the exemptions. So I appreciate that because I was writing a question and then there were the two figures and I was like, I got to scratch this out. So great job on providing that additional information, and I hope it clarifies the choice that we're making for others.
Ms. Hall.
One thing that this makes clear is that we certainly need to get out in our districts and make sure that all of our property owners are aware of Stevens Day. That has been one of the big revelations, that there are lots of families who do not know. So I think it would behoove us to be very aggressive in doing that.
Yes, ma'am. From the hearing yesterday, I think that's going to be the same message that all of the municipalities are going to basically preach over the next few weeks, that we just need to educate homeowners what's available to them. We did find out in a conversation with the tax assessor, there's a great number of homeowners that never applied for homestead exemption.
And so that is the place, that the assessor's office is where they should.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes.
Dr.
And to
Brinkman?
follow up, not to cut you off, to follow up, I did ask the tax commissioner if she would come make a presentation to us about the different types of exemptions. I believe Ms. Grabowski asked about that, and we're trying to schedule her for the next Finance Committee meeting that morning.
February, March?
February.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Dr. Brinkman?
Can you pull up those lovely line graphs? So this is great. This is what people need to know. I'm going to do exactly what I tell my son every time he comes up and says, I saw something on YouTube. And I remind him, what are you supposed to do before you tell me about something you saw on YouTube? He's like, I did fact check it, Dad. I was like, okay, and what sources? So I was just wanting to know, this was created by us, this was created by the state. Who has looked at this and said, this is correct, this is what would occur for a taxpayer? Because I can make a really pretty graph that says things, but in this day and age, I would like something behind that more than just a PowerPoint slide.
This is created by us based upon the last 10 years of data for CPI adjustments.
Okay, and
So
this
we
is based on our understanding currently of how they would
how the
calculate things?
exemptions are calculated, and we created the home value of $446,000 increasing to $612,000. But that was created by us. But the calculations to calculate the exemptions are standard.
Okay. And we're confident that, like, if we sent this to somebody else, they'd be like, yes. I don't know who I would say, hey, can you look at these numbers and make sure that we're calculating how this would affect a taxpayer? That's all.
Right,
I
right.
want to know that for me,
Yeah.
but I also want to know that for all of Chatham County.
Yeah, we're pretty much doing that. We share some information. I share some information with the city of Savannah on what they presented and what I'm presenting. We're pretty much on the same page. We just need to get the tax commissioner's office to vet it, but honestly, both sides are kind of, I hate to say staying away from it, but we just need them, okay, if based upon these numbers, are the figures correct?
Yeah,
That's really
that's what I want.
we want
Yeah,
them to tell
yeah,
us.
and it's troubling that nobody wants. Thank you for doing this, because you're putting out like this is what we believe this would happen. It would be nice if one of the bigger entities behind the bill, or a bigger entity that actually collects the taxes would say, yes, this is what would happen if your scenario played out.
Yeah.
And if they aren't willing to say that and back it, that really bothers me and troubles me, because we need to be transparent. You're trying to be transparent with what you believe would be the calculation and how that would impact this homeowner that's, made up. But they should be able to say, yes, if this played out, this is what they would pay in taxes, and this would be the differential. And I would love for somebody listening, or whoever you keep contacting, to be willing to put that down, because somebody at the state level should be able to do that. If this
They
is
should
supposed
be,
to pass,
correct.
they should have actually pushed out the data. I know that we have our own, but they should be able to show exactly how it would affect, House Bill 581 would affect somebody, and then we know how Stevens Day is going to affect somebody, and we can lay them down on top of each other.
Yes.
If that person exists and you're listening, please contact us, and
Yes.
please keep trying to find people that
Yes.
would be a second eye to say, yes, this is correct.
Yes, and that's very important. We wish the state had given more information. Well, as you have heard, they're still trying to make adjustments to the law. Right now, we don't know what we're going to end up with. But the X factor is, what will the CPI index do in future years? Nobody knows.
Okay, so I have Ms. Grabowski, Howard Hall, Dr. Hoskins Brown.
I was just going to say quickly, thank you, Mr. Jackson, for mentioning having the tax commissioner here, and happy, if that doesn't work out, happy to have those conversations offline, too.
Yeah, she was trying to catch you at the Railroad Museum.
Oh,
but
at the.
we couldn't find it.
Savannah, it's a big hall. So I appreciate the presentation, and certainly we have this local legislation that works for us really well. If there are unforeseen things in the future, it's a lot easier to work with things that are local and apply to our county versus having to work with something that applies to the whole state. I do think that there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around this, so I do hope that the state will allow us to take a little more time and push that date to May 1st so that we can answer any other questions that might be out there. But we also are at their mercy as to when we have to make that decision. So just appreciate the presentation, and to pick up on what Ms. Hall was saying about, educating the community and doing a lot of neighborhood-based work. I have found time and time again, it is unfortunate the number of homeowners that don't understand that they have to go in and file for the Stevens Day exemption. And the city and the tax assessor's office have worked together in the past to be able to promote that at the neighborhood level. So hopefully those are opportunities that will continue. Thank you.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Thank you. Our meetings, our hearings are based on the March 1st deadline.
Correct. Deadline, correct.
Now, since the state is pushing it back to May, do we
We-
need to vote? Are we still going to make our resolution on March 1st? Or do you foresee any more additional information coming from the state that may make us change our minds or provide more information? Well, I guess what I'm asking, are we going to vote prior to?
What we're hearing, basically, honestly, is hearsay. The state probably, at the rate they're going, they probably won't make a decision until after they're out of session. The way they do things, who knows when we're going to get a response. So we want to stay the course and move forward. That's as are the other municipalities in Chatham County. We're going to stay the course.
And
Right.
what we've heard is that the law, a new bill has been drafted and has been submitted, but it would have to make it out of both chambers before the end of this month in order for it to come into effect and alter our pathway. So given what we know for sure right now, we feel it's in our best interest to continue the pathway. And if we hear something new and emerging that is official, not word of mouth, then we can alter our plan. But right now, everything is just word of mouth.
Because I'm actually hearing in neighborhood meetings, city and county, they're moving forward
Yes.
with it.
Everyone
Everybody
else
is
is.
saying that they're opting out. And so my question was, have you all voted yet? But the public is being advised that they are opting out prior to them voting on it.
Have to.
Their public and their hearings, announcements,
Right,
they have
right.
to
So they're-
make a decision. I
right.
mean, not make a decision, but
Right.
advertise their position.
Intent. Your intent has to be advertised.
Okay.
But you don't vote until later.
Right, so I'm just saying that it's being verbally done in community meetings.
Yes.
What their intents are. Also, Sonia Jackson is a great resource. I actually called her and spoke with her to get a better understanding, so it'd be great if she can come out to really break this down, because after speaking with her, if we abandon CPI, that can have an impact on millage rates.
Yes. For counties that don't have an exemption, they're the ones that have the biggest resistance, because they either have to rely on increasing their millage rate or getting legislative approval to do a local sales tax. Right now, they're not even able to do a penny sales tax for regular operations until they get approval from the voters, the state and the voters. So counties that don't have the exemption, they're the ones that are struggling, and they're really pushing against it because they will lose a lot of money.
Dr. Hoskins-Brown, then Mr. Smith.
Thank you. That was the nature of my question, is that I believe that we had gotten some feedback from the tax commissioner, that Dr. Howard Hall had shared that with us, that the vulnerability for the district was slightly different because we do have access and have been successful with East Plus in ways that the county has not. And so our requirement to go, the risk of us having to ask for a millage increase is different from the city and the county, and therefore kind of requires that we consider this differently. Correct. Because the cost to the taxpayer would be different for us because of how our revenues are generated. So I'm glad that you're following up on that suggestion, that we get something directly from the tax commissioner's office. But that was the most recent feedback I remember us getting from Ms. Jackson.
Correct.
Was that the exposure was different, and therefore our strategy could be different.
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you for your presentation, and a quick question for you. Based upon these programs, they are established to make sure that as the property values increase, that taxes don't become overwhelming for homeowners.
Correct.
Okay, so my question is, in the weird scenario that a property goes down in value, these programs, would they allow the taxes to then go down as well, or are they still going to be locked into that same rate? Or is that a question for the commissioner more than you?
From what is explained to us, even in the current homestead exemption with Stevens Day, if the property goes down, when they come back and do their reassessment, they will restart your base year with that, depending upon that decrease. Or if you have an addition to your house and it goes the other direction, it reestablishes the base. It adds value or either takes away value from that base year.
Thank you.
Hang on. Mr. Kachmar?
It's in response to him, just a clarification. If you
Okay, go ahead.
So I had that personal experience happen to us because when we bought our house, we bought it for less than the assessed value. So the base value is based on what the assessed value is of your property at the time of your filing. So I'm happy to talk to you more offline, but it's based on whatever is on record as your assessed value. That's what your base value is.
Mr. Kachmar?
So I understand our rationale for leaning towards opting out is we think our current arrangement with Stevens Day provides better protection for taxpayers. Is that correct? As opposed to looking at maximizing revenues for our governmental entity.
Right.
Okay.
Right, correct.
Okay, so House Bill 581 was passed, again, this is my understanding, tell me if I'm wrong, to provide the same homestead exemption protections in the rest of the state in counties that don't have a local Stevens Day, right?
Right. That's correct.
All right. And then your presentation and what I've read says you get the most protection of Stevens Day or 581.
That's correct.
right? So I guess my question is, why would we not opt in if it's the taxpayer gets the most protection? Now, I know why we don't opt in. It's because it's extra work figuring out which one gives taxpayers the most protection. But that's not our work. And the General Assembly said somebody else has to do that work. I feel bad for those people, but at the end of the day, if, say, Stevens Day went away or got significantly modified, we've got a safety net of 581 as currently drafted. If we opt out, we have Stevens Day. Stevens Day's been here 25 years. I get it. It's never going away in theory. Everything gets tinkered with in theory, though, or in practice. So say Stevens Day went away and we had opted out of 581, we have nothing based on current circumstances, correct? So, I mean, somebody tell me why I'm wrong or how I'm thinking about this improperly. If Stevens Day protects taxpayers and 581 is meant to also protect taxpayers, and we get the best protection that year of Stevens Day or 581, why would we not opt in and keep 581 as a safety net? That's my question.
And Ms. Campbell?
So actually, I was going to say what Mr. Cashmar just said. I think there's a misconception that, at least from what I've heard, that people are concerned that Stevens Day is going away, and therefore HB 581 is the new improved version, whereas that hasn't been my understanding either, that it's going away. And I agree with Mr. Cashmar's assessment that if there's little risk, it does seem very extra in the sense that it doesn't provide much to our community for those who are already opted in. But I also had a question. So, and I'm sorry if you covered this, but the floating local option sales tax, the FLOST, that is provided by HB 581.
Yes.
Is that something that we opt into if we end up opting in or accepting HB 581 as it stands?
As we mentioned earlier, and what has been explained to us from some legal folks around the state, FLOSS is not eligible or does not pertain to school districts, only city and county governments.
Got it. Okay, and we already have.
Right. They would have to change the state law or constitution to include school districts, and that's probably a hard pill to swallow if it could happen.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Cashmar, then Ms. Hall.
So another follow-up question to my question. Does 581 apply automatically, or do you have to opt in for that
You
as
still
well?
have to apply for it.
Okay.
Just like Stevens Day or local homestead, you still have to apply for it.
Okay.
The issue locally is there's a great number of homeowners never applied.
Right, and I was going to say, if Stevens Day, you have to apply. If 581 applied automatically, that would be an added benefit to opting in, but it doesn't, right?
So I want to make sure we understood your question. You're saying if we go with House Bill 581, does the individual taxpayer still have to file?
Yeah, or does it apply automatically?
apply automatically?
Because
They have to file.
They have to file,
They
so
have
it's
to
the
file.
same,
Okay.
yeah, it's the
Okay.
same action step.
Okay, all right. So hang on, I have Ms. Hall, then Dr. Bringman.
Under this list of cons for opting in, the bullet says potential confusion on exemption process and tax digests. And that's what I'm worried about, state incompetence. That's what I'm concerned about. Well, the county, we have, we've been rolling merrily along for a while. This is a state initiative coming in, and there will be more input. It wouldn't just be a county situation. So that's what I'm concerned about, state incompetence.
Dr. Bringman.
So, Piggy, following up on Mr. Cashmar's,
In a long list of other things.
following up on Mr. Cashmar's clarification of if we don't do anything and 581 becomes part of Chatham County tax assessment, as a taxpayer, when I go there to fill out my paperwork, and I know I'm getting way down the path, but does that mean the person across the desk looks at me and says, well, would you like to file for Stevens Day exemption, or would you like to file for House Bill 581 exemption? And then me as the taxpayer goes, well, which one's better? And they're like, I don't know, I get paid $725, you just have to pick one. I mean, because I could see for different valuations and at a different year, depending on what that CPI is, that sometimes you might want to actually lock yourself in at Stevens Day, sometimes you might want to lock yourself in at 581. Which is fine, we're giving people options, but. No, but the year you go
First
up,
year.
you might not, and.
I think
holy
what's
cow, I
important-
feel bad for the tax commissioner now having to keep up with, is this house on 581, is this house on Stevens Day?
If I can interject real quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
The key is you're filing in homestead, you're filing their homestead. So the homestead filing is what triggers both Stevens Day and 581. So that you're not filing specifically for Stevens Day. You file a homestead, and it's the homestead that triggers the eligibility for the benefit of either. So you wouldn't be choosing between. You would have your homestead filed, and as a homestead filer, then you would have those benefits if both were in place.
But can I clarify, so to Board Member Cashmar's question about the taxpayer getting the benefit of the better one, does that still apply? I understand you're just applying
Yeah.
for a general homestead, but then somebody in the background
Yeah.
has to decide
Right.
if we choose
That's the
to
burden
opt
on
in.
that's the burden on the assessor's office to do that calculation to determine which one would apply to the particular, based on which is the bigger benefit. It wouldn't be a matter of opting. It is the math that's done year by year, tracking the benefit of either based on the two different, if they have two different CPIs that we're applying.
So the benefit of Stevens Day is that we already know what that number is going to be calculated on, but with the H Bill 581, we're not real sure.
I think that the issue is with Stevens Day, we know what it is, and we have local control over it. If we opt into 581, Mr. Katchmar's right. If Stevens Day goes away, we don't have
Anything.
that protection anymore because we don't have Stevens Day. But we also locally have control over Stevens Day, here to discern. And even we could align the CPI. They could local group could align the CPI to the CPIU if they wanted. They could do what they wanted to, but we would have that local control. But with the state law, we don't know what modification could happen in the state law. I think that's what the city is concerned about. You don't know what's going to happen. And we have many people that have the historic benefit under Stevens Day of having their property baseline established very far back in the past. And so the concern is what could happen if there's a change that we don't foresee. And I think they have concerns about how it's written itself. We're going with the guidance from GMA that we went over here. But I think the concern is you don't really know what could happen with the legislation going forward and how that could impact Stevens Day if you're in that. But we just don't know. It's speculating.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Yes, I would love to have my 40 acres and a mule. Happy Black History Month, everybody. But when I'm looking at this chart, one of the major differences is actually the property in the acres. But the major difference between the two, property smaller than 5 acres or all properties.
Right.
And when you look at it geographically in Chatham County, what percentage, well, do you have an idea
When
what
we
percentage
first
of
looked at
people
it-
own more than 5 acres?
When we first looked at it, we're not sure. When we first looked at it, it was about 75 properties. It could be a little more. We just need to get some clarification from the assessor's office. But when we first looked at it, it was 75 properties. But of those 75 properties, they could get the exemption on the first 5 acres of the of their properties, not all of their
Not all.
acres. Right.
So you think about what is the origin of this entire bill when you see this being the number one difference with the number of properties being owned.
And again, from listening to legislators, that was one of the items they just overlooked. It was supposed to be the exact same at Stevens Day.
Okay.
There's talking about amending it.
I mean, in my conversations with Representative Stevens in Atlanta, he said this was intended to mirror Stevens Day, and it doesn't.
Right, right.
And to Attorney Dennison's point, the uncertainty of the future at the state level, I mean, you know, it could come in and say that 581 preempts local exemptions, and the value is the year at which the legislation is adopted, which would not be good for Chatham County. And maybe that seems a stretch too far, but I think we all know that things happen in legislation very quickly, and just the uncertainty, and again, that's the advantage of hopefully if they push until May 1st, can get the legislation cleaned up so we know exactly what it is we are deciding, would be really helpful, because it's just so muddy at the moment. I think the devil is in the details, and so I guess that's just a plea that they will, in fact, at least give us until May 1st so that we can hopefully see what the final legislation will look like.
Dr. Hoskins-Brown.
This conversation is really helpful, and it does point out the differences of the things that we need to consider versus what I've seen just in general conversation of the other entities that are considering this issue. Right now I'm in 3 workplaces, and 2 workplaces, people are starting to make decisions on fear and not facts. I'm not going to make a decision on House Bill 581 about what I fear folks are going to do in the future. What I know is the people that I am a steward for largely don't have 5 acres. And the facts that we know related to how this is going to affect them is what I'm going to work on until we get some better information. Because I'm not hearing that I'm hearing that we're going to talk to the tax commissioner, although she has been helpful to share some of her perspectives already. I hear that we're talking to legislators who are not on the bottom income side of this issue. And we are having hearings that people, that the public can come to. But I'm not hearing persuasive things that take me away from some of the salient points that Mr. Cashmar made.
Cashmar.
I missed this earlier. Did we set a date to vote?
February 19th, unless we
Well,
learn new information.
I was going to say, what's the deadline? March
Right
1?
now, first.
Should we move our date to vote to February 28 or 29, whatever the last day of February is?
Don't we have
Just
to
to
physically
Right.
mail in what we
Yes.
decide
Yeah,
to do?
We
it
have to
has to
physically
be,
mail it
It
in?
has to be in their
So
office.
we were
Yeah.
trying to account for.
Snail mail?
Can we FedEx, or does it have to be USPS?
Yeah.
Has to be
Does it have
received.
to be mailed, or does it just have to receive physically?
received physically by
Received.
March 1st with the state. That is,
All right, so we could still vote the
So it can be
27th and
courier,
FedEx it or something. And if it doesn't get there by tracking, I'll drive it up the morning of the 1st.
we've done that before.
Hey, my point was, should we push back our vote date to see what happens with the General Assembly?
Give ourselves a little bit of cushion, but
Yeah.
we absolutely, and to avoid us having to convene everybody again, but we absolutely could push it back.
But we could still have our hearings.
You're right. Yes, indeed.
This is more logistics that probably we shouldn't be in, but this document that has to be received by the 1st, does it have original signatures or anything on it? Like, what has to be received?
By the state.
Yes, I'm assuming original signatures, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't seen anything.
Okay, so like my
otherwise.
cousin who lives in
Yes,
Atlanta, we could send it to them by email and they could drive it across town. Like, this
Right,
doesn't have
right.
to be as arduous as we're making it.
I want to say it's similar to what they
Yeah,
do
that's
for
what I'm
the.
saying.
Yeah, I want to say it's similar to what they do for the tax digest. It's original signatures, and they hand deliver the tax
Original,
digest
okay.
to Atlanta.
All right, thank you.
And
A resolution that has been provided that we will have to mimic from the state. It's actually under a different code section other than HB 581. And the board will vote to either support that or not. And the signatures would have to be put on that. Obviously, it would be certified as we normally do. And that would have to be in the hands of the state on May 1st and no later. I'm sorry.
March 1st.
The other M, March 1st. Wishful thinking, March 1st as currently written in the law. So that's our challenge on the schedule. The other part I want to call out on the HB 581 is this feels like a fire drill, but there is a component built in there that said that jurisdictions could not start the process until the law became effective January 1st, 2025. So we had this small window of Jan 1 to March 1st to get all this done and make this decision.
Yes, Mr. Kachmar.
So everything I said earlier were questions, just to be clear. I didn't write the bill. I'm not a legislative aide. No, no, for real, like, I want to know the answers, and I think a lot of the answers are unknowable. The devil's in the details. HB 581 is not entirely clear. So I'm just asking questions. I don't know what the bill really means or what it really says, but if that's the way it is, it's something to think about. That's all.
Yes, Ms. Grabowski.
Just real quickly, for those who are maybe watching this craziness, I did notice that Chatham County has one of their hearings at the same time as our hearing tomorrow evening, so please know that was not intentional or a way to try and divide. We have 3 hearings, so just, I noticed that myself, so I wanted to just, that was not intentional. We had to set dates and advertise well in advance, so.
Anyone else? Dr. Ringman?
Yeah, I just got to do it because there's such a good joke here. And it's tied to Savannah. So in my best Outcast voice, sorry, Miss Jackson.
Oh, my God.
That was bad.
On that note. Okay. Oh, everyone's getting in on this.
You're intending to make me cry.
I mean,
Oh, my God.
And from my understanding, there's
Here we go.
one-
Not like us. All right. So, I had to. All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. Mr. I will now accept a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.